Hello and welcome back to another episode of the GCSUNScast, the Gold Coast Suns show by fans for fans. I'm your host Shane, and unfortunately tonight we must start off on a serious note. The GCSUNScast is changing, and first of all I'd like to thank my former co-host Tom for his passion and contributions to the show over the years, and wish him well going ahead. Moving forward, the GCSUNScast will focus on returning to the roots of its creation, to give all Suns fans a voice and a platform to do so. So, Suns fans, if you want to talk Suns footy, message GCSUNScast on Facebook or Twitter and let me know what you love about the Suns. So, moving forward, I've got a special guest on the line today. Shannon, welcome to the show.
G'day, Shane. Thanks for having me on tonight, and thanks for all the guests for listening to me. Sorry, all the patrons out there.
Yep, you've brought patrons up, so I should thank our Patreon donors. Okay. Jack's dad, Paul Vosti, Dale Snelling, Tom Kim, Brodie Burgess, Kate Kelland, Robbie Fiorini, Chris Moore and Tim. Thanks so much for your support, guys, and sticking with us in these times. We hope we can welcome some more Patreon members in the near future. Let's start off, though, by talking some footy, so they've got something to look forward to. Now, Tom, sorry. I'm getting used to this new change. Okay.
No, that's fine, mate.
So, Shannon, welcome to the show. What is your history with the Suns? Why are you such a big Suns fan?
I was always a footy fan. I grew up on the Gold Coast, with a little bit in Melbourne as well, but mostly on the Gold Coast, and we always said that if Gold Coast got a team, I'd be on board. So in 2008, when they announced the team, and then 2009 when they started playing TAC, just started going to games. Wasn't really fully involved. The heart wasn't 100% in it. But then come the VFL year, I don't know what clicked then, but it just sort of went basically full steam ahead. I was all in from 2010, so I've been a member since then. Lots of games, lots of misery as we all have, but yeah, lots of good highlights as well.
So what are some of your favourite highlights? What's your favourite game?
Oh, favourite game? Probably, if I had to pick one, and obviously we've had a lot of good wins over the years. With the poor history, each win seems pretty special, but yeah, definitely the highlight for me would be round 22 in 2012 versus Carlton. It happened to fall on my birthday, which made it a bit more special, but in my opinion, it's still probably the greatest upset we've had for where we were at as a team versus our opposition. We started off so strong that game, and Carlton, I think they come up a bit cocky and they just couldn't reel us back in.
Okay, that's probably one of the games I don't really remember too much. Was that the one where Carlton's coach got sacked afterwards? That
was the demise of Brett Ratton. At that stage, I think we'd only won 2 games all year, which was GWS, I think, the week before or 2 weeks before. And another good game, the Carmichael Hunt goal after the siren, was also that year, which came in, I think, round 16. So we were a pretty ordinary team, still a young, developing team. And yeah, Carlton were about 3rd or 4th on the ladder, so everyone had written us off up until that stage, and we just come out on fire and yeah, really rolled them. It was really good. For someone who's not a massive Carlton fan, I enjoyed that. Good birthday gift.
Okay, so who's your favourite all-time player for the Suns?
All-time player? This is going to be a little bit bitter, seeing we're playing Melbourne this week, but I was always a Stephen May fan. Loved what he'd done for the club, loved his attitude on and off the field, the way he went hard, both at the ball and the player. Got himself in a bit of trouble, obviously. But, yeah, probably Stephen May all time.
Oh, that's interesting, considering, yeah, he's had a checkered history with the Suns, a love-hate sort of relationship. And
absolutely.
There's plenty of people out there that still love what he's done. Who's your favourite player now?
It's a tough one. I'm really invested in this high pressure game that we've got at the moment, so it'd be the easy and cheap way out to say Matty Rowell, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say probably Holman and Greenwood. Just the tackling pressure and clearance work that they're bringing to the Suns at the moment. Really something to look forward to. It's something we haven't seen.
Yeah, I'm personally a big fan of the defensive side of the games, and I've always preached that, so good to have someone else that thinks along those lines. Our top 3 will be interesting then to see if we've both gone defensive players. But before we get to that, let's jump into talking about the game against Geelong. So Gold Coast Suns, 8 goals for 52, were defeated by Geelong, 13 goals, 11-89, a 37-point loss in the end. It certainly didn't feel like the margin was that big, did it? The Suns certainly were there to play for most of the game.
Yeah, not at all. And you look back, it's happened a few times this year, but Geelong's goals, a lot of them come in short, sharp bursts, which has been a problem for a long time with us, and it's always going to be a problem until we develop where our better players are not 20, 30 game players and they go from 50 to 100. So we've just got to really rein in them small periods and small outbursts. And you look at this Geelong game on the weekend, definitely no exception. They kicked 4 goals straight on us in the first quarter and then again in the last quarter. And if you take that out, I think the result's a little bit different.
Yeah, it definitely is. They got away early in that first quarter, and I think it was a 20-point margin at quarter time. The Suns were able to peg back, which is really quite remarkable, considering they were also down a star player, Matt Rowell. And then I think that third quarter, again, they had a few late goals and got the margin back out to 15. And then they just went on with it from there. The Suns weren't able to score a goal in that last quarter, which is probably the more damning stat there. King kicked 3 goals. Day and Weller each kicked 2. So our forward line's starting to functioning, and we're getting some midfield goals too. So that's quite impressive, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Having a spread of goal kickers is definitely something that we haven't always had. It's been back in the days of Lynch kicking bags for us, always the leading goal scorer, and even as late as last year, I think Sexton absolutely dominated the leading goal kicking by our standards anyway. So it is good to get that spread there. King's obviously coming along really well, but just the quality of the ball going into the forward 50 is definitely at a much improved level, and a lot of that's to contribute.
Yeah, I bet some of the forwards we've lost in the past, like Tom Lynch, would have been loving that display of forward entries, the way they were getting it. King's just marking most of the ball he gets to, and he kicked a beautiful goal that went over his head. I think it was the second quarter. That's now Goal of the Year nomination. It took me a bit by surprise, I guess, but I don't think there might have been too much competition this week.
Yeah, not at all. It was a pretty lowly week for the Goal of the Year nominations, unlike the Mark of the Year ones. Unfortunately, we didn't make that list, but I guess any good publicity coming with them Goal of the Year noms are definitely good for us at the moment. We'll take whatever we can get.
Yep. So this game, I don't want to talk too much about Geelong because it is the Suns podcast, but I felt Geelong ran, kicked and used the ball a lot better than us, and they destroyed us in the clearances. And I don't think the Suns have been beaten in clearances since that Port Adelaide game in round 1. So it highlighted a weakness, and where we probably lost that game was through that midfield battle. Our 1%ers and basic skills, we were well down on those, and I think late in that last quarter, late in the third quarter, we were just missing easy targets. That was so frustrating to watch.
It definitely was frustrating, and the fact that a lot of them missed targets, they weren't coming from, our younger players who might be a bit more forgiven. Your Budricks and Andersons and that, they still make their mistakes, but it's really disheartening to see it from some of our more experienced leaders of the Suns too. Yeah,
I don't know what Harbrow and Hanley were thinking. Some of those, I think they might have been directly related to conceding like 5 goals, maybe more.
I think it was a little bit more than that, especially when you factor in the 50-metre penalties as well. I think they both had 50s against them. I think Harbrow might have even had 2. I'm not 100% sure on that. But it's definitely costly, and it's something that we can't have going forward.
Absolutely. Do you think the boys looked a bit tired in that last quarter? Do you think the lack of interchanges or maybe same-day travel just put them off? They started slow and then they finished really slowly as well.
I'm not too sure how much tiredness comes into it. In the end, I think Geelong just sort of figured us out. One of the negatives that I took out of the game was I don't know whether we can put it down to coaching or what it was, but we just didn't seem to play the ground very well. Obviously, we've been fantastic this year, especially since round 2 with, spreading the ball, using it wide, hitting targets like really deep on the flanks and the wings. It's something we couldn't do at Geelong, obviously, with such a narrow ground. So players looked a little bit out of shape there, and I think that played a big part. And we did, as you know, start to get on top of it through the middle stage of the game, but I think just Geelong adapted better and they were all over us. By the time they got a few cheap goals in the end, I think it was just a little bit too late.
Yeah. That goal by Gary Ablett in the last quarter was pretty impressive, and by then the game was all done and dusted.
You can't blame Butters for giving that one up.
He did so well throughout the whole game, Butterick, to keep Ablett relatively quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. He's coming along well, and I never actually pictured him as that sort of lockdown player. I had him more as a sort of attacking, but yeah, he did keep Ablett quite contained, and hopefully, that's a sign of when we need that going forward, he's going to be able to step up into that role.
Yeah. All right, it's time for one of our new segments, Shannon. Play of the game.
Play of the game.
So this segment, we're going to highlight an individual bit of brilliance and just give plaudits to a certain player on the Suns side. So the play of the game I'm awarding this week to Twinkle Toes Bose.
I like the rhyme there too. Yeah, definitely. I had a feeling that could have been the play that was brought up. It was definitely a highlight.
Yeah, so I've looked back at this footage. He's evaded a tackle from Duncan, danced around Parfitt, and then went on and dodged out of the way of Selwood. So some pretty big names in that Geelong midfield there that tried to take him down, and he made it look so easy. And then to finish up with a beautiful kick to Sam Day in the forward 50, which resulted in a goal. It's certainly the play of the game.
100%, it definitely is, and once again, it gives us something to look forward to going forward with the Suns. It does make you wonder how long it is until Jack gets a few more minutes in the midfield. I wouldn't say he's wasted down back. He's definitely playing a good role down there, but if he's going to continue to put balls inside 50 like that, then that we really need to think about what we're doing with him.
He's certainly one of those players that could probably play anywhere and really impact. It just depends, I guess, on who else is around him, so that he's the Mr. Fix-It, and he'll just go wherever he's required to go.
Such a handy player to have, especially with such a young squad, and he seems to have that sort of leadership qualities as well. So, yeah, just all-round good signs.
Okay, well, let's jump into our top 3. So for one vote this week, I'm giving it to Butterick for his effort on keeping Ablett quiet. 2 votes, I'm going to go with Greenwood. 21 disposals, 11 tackles, 23 pressure acts and 6 clearances. He was far and away the best Suns midfielder. And 3 votes, I'm going with Nick Holman. We saw a beautiful article by Michael Whiting last week about his pressure acts and the way he works in the side when he doesn't have the football. And we saw that again this week, but we saw him add another level to his game, which was more attacking, more offensive. He got the 13 disposals, 4 goal assists, 11 tackles and 21 pressure acts. So really strong effort from Holman. What about you, Shannon?
Yeah, great stats there. Mine are a little bit similar, but I'm going 1 vote, Lockie Weller, and the reason I give him the vote there, he didn't have a massive amount of the ball, 11 disposals, 5 tackles, 4 inside 50s, but when the Suns were up and about, he seemed to be the catalyst going forward. His run and spread, he was always providing an option, and his finishing has just come to another level this year. And this game, against Geelong, I think when we were up and about, Lockie was up and about, so it's hard to say that he wasn't a big part of it. So, 1 vote to Lockie. I had 2 votes for Holman. Basically, everything you said is pretty much spot on. It's hard to say for a casual fan who is watching, might not notice the things that he does. He doesn't do a lot offensively with the ball, but, the tackling pressure and, just that sort of, the effect he has on the game that might not be noticed by others is fantastic, and I reckon he's going to turn into a real favourite of Stewie Dew and the coaching panel going forward. And for me, 3 votes Greenwood. I just think 21 disposals and 11 tackles, absolutely incredible. It's something that the Suns have been missing for a long time. So absolutely fantastic to have that. And yeah, it just makes me excited to have that sort of quality of player around these young and developing midfielders.
Yeah, well, Greenwood's been criticised lately for his lack of disposals. He certainly corrected that this week. When Matt Rowell went down, I'm thinking, all right, who's going to step up in our midfield to get those 20-odd possessions that Matt Rowell would normally get and have an impact? And it came down to Hugh Greenwood for me, and he certainly did that.
Yeah, for me, it was either going to be Greenwood or Swallow. And Swallow, by no means, he didn't have a terrible game, but Greenwood's just taken it to that next level. And hopefully with Rowell getting injured, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit more later, he can continue to do that over the next few weeks, few months.
Yeah. Okay, time for another new segment.
This is incredible!
So, this is incredible. We're going to talk about a positive that we enjoyed from the game, something that we took from it. We mentioned this earlier before, but the resolve to fight back after a horrid first quarter, being 20 points down at quarter time. I think there's a stat floating about that any side that's up by 7 points at quarter time goes on to win the game, with the exception of the draw. I think that was included in there.
Wow.
So, knowing that at quarter time, I thought, okay, we're probably not going to win this game. They certainly came back and even got in front early in that third quarter, and there was every chance they could have broken that trend. I think it's happened about 20 times now.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think we got to 9 points up at one stage. I could be wrong on that score, but it was something like that. And we were looking all right too. We had all the momentum until, as we spoke about earlier, one of them 50-metre penalties, I think it might have been against Harbrow. I think it was, give Geelong a goal and really turn the momentum back. So we were definitely not only back in the game, but we sort of really got on top of Geelong. I was getting a little bit excited, to be honest. I thought, the unthinkable might happen. But, yeah, just great resolve from the young kids and, real pleasing to see.
Okay, and what was your incredible moment, Shannon?
Not so much an incredible moment, but for me, just seeing the chemistry between the forward line really coming together. As we spoke about, Sam Day, 2 goals, Ben King, 3 goals, working together. And, they were marking more often than not, but if they weren't marking, they were actually basically putting the ball in positions where it was going to create a contest for the Crummers and at least keep the ball in that forward 50. So it's really coming together down in that forward line, whether that's just the work rate, which has been fantastic with those 2 players, or the quality of the ball coming inside 50 is yet to be seen. But just with everything coming together, Sam Day, Ben King, it's great to have them 2 down there.
Absolutely. It's been a hotly contested topic, at least in pre-season, over what's our best forward line. I think it's pretty obvious now it is King and Day. We haven't seen Bright, but obviously he's not pushing his case well enough to get into the side. And King and Day have either been taking turns popping up, or as we saw this week, both popped up to kick a couple of goals and give the team a shot at the win.
Yeah.
So it was kind of weird the way the goals were being kicked as well. I noticed Weller kicked the first 2 goals of the game, King kicked the next 3 goals for the Suns, and then Day kicked the 2 goals for the Suns. So it was they were all getting their goals in batches. So
I hadn't actually noticed that. So yeah, that's a good pickup.
So I think the way the Suns, I spoke last week about how King was our number 1 forward target. I think what's happened during the game is they've changed their main man. So Weller's 2 goals were just good positioning, getting the ball around that 50 mark and hitting the goals. But King was the target for those 3 goals that he kicked in the second quarter. But then Day stood up and kicked 2 goals in the third quarter, and he was the main target. So it was very interesting that they're maybe trying to put the opposition off by changing targets.
Yeah, and a lot of that could be, without looking too far into it, could be where the defenders were going as well. So I didn't really pay too much attention as to who was on each player at each time. But having them two options up there, and Sam Day's much improved. He's looking like a different player just physically as well. He's really built up in the last 12 months, and having that imposing presence down there, it's definitely going to help, especially with Ben King still developing physically.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move into the next part of this segment.
This is ridiculous!
So, what's the ridiculous moment of this game, or the negative? I'm going to say it was Harbrow and Hanley in particular. I don't like to single out people, but as we discussed before, they were directly responsible for at least 5 goals, probably more. I think I might have even seen it was 8 goals. That's not on for 2 senior players to put up a performance like that. It's just not on. Their accuracy was poor, their decision making was poor, and their discipline was poor.
Yeah, definitely, and especially Harbrow in particular went down at 53% disposal efficiency. He had 12 kicks, but he just didn't do much with them. And as you brought up, the discipline it's just not what you want from your leaders down back. And they probably are. They are the 2 generals of that back line. So you got to lead by example. And I think it was really Ballard and Collins who stopped the floodgates from opening down there. And I think if Hanley and Harbrow maintain their spot in the team, I think there needs to be a big lift this week.
Well, here's a stat for you. Harbrow recorded the lowest ever ranking points since they started doing Champion Data ranking points.
That's absolutely insane. So
that's how bad of a game Harbrow was playing. Yeah. So what's your ridiculous moment, your negative from this game?
Well, I was going to touch on just the shape of the GMHBA ground and how, I don't think we come down with the right game plan for it. We weren't able to use that sort of run and spread in the same way we would at Metricon. So I'll sort of leave that alone because we have touched on it already. But for me, I just thought Witts, he looked a little bit underdone compared to where he's been at certain weeks. Now, there's been no real talk of any injury clouds or anything like that. He won the hit-outs, not really to advantage, in my opinion. I haven't really trolled the stats on that. But he had 29, didn't seem to do much with them, and he was just really slow around the ground, and his disposal just didn't look right. He always looked rushed, which he hasn't sort of done that this year. So for me, I'm just wondering what the question mark is over Witts at the moment.
Yeah, he played similar to the way he played in that Port game, so I don't know what it was. In the Port game, we made up that he was coming back from an injury. He wasn't match fit, but this game, I don't know. It maybe the travel. A 209 centimetre bloke on a plane. It's probably not the best preparation.
Absolutely not. So we'll see how he bounces back this week, and I think he still might have got in the coaches' votes this week officially, so I might be being a little bit hard on Jared. But for me, there just didn't look like there was something right, and I hope we can put it down to something as simple as the travel, and that balances out a bit this week. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on and discuss some injury news. So Matt Rowell, as we all know, any Suns fan that's been following the club will know that this shining beacon for the club is injured. Done his shoulder, AC ligament in his shoulder, I think it was. Looks like he's going to be out for the year. The club's coming out this afternoon, and they've decided to operate on him. It's going to be out for at least 12 weeks, so 3 months. It's basically the same injury Gary Ablett did back in 2014, almost 6 years to the day.
Well, there's a positive we can take out of that. 12 weeks, that brings him back just in time for finals, doesn't it?
It does. Or maybe the season's still going if we get any delays.
Well, who knows? We could be back in time for round 8, the way things are going. But it's horrific news. And, not just from, we can look at it selfishly from a Suns fan and think, that could cost us games going forward, and that might well be the case. But just Matt Rowell, he's just been such a pleasant person to sort of, watch. He comes across as a real nice guy, loves his footy, so it's just demoralising for him and his family as well. It's real heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah. So I've done a bit of research into this surgery, and it's been described to me as the dislocation's almost like a golf tee has been chipped on the top of the tee, and the ball, because there's that chip, the ball can't stay there anymore. So what they do in this case is they get a bit of bone and graft it to the shoulder and try to repair that chip, so the shoulder stays in the socket. And there's also apparently a tendon attached to that bone, which acts like a bit of a sling to help the shoulder stay in that socket. So once this is done, and if he makes a full recovery, no dramas, he shouldn't have any more issues with that shoulder popping out. So that's a good thing in a way. Like, we can go ahead not having to worry every time he gets tackled, because based on how Matt Rowell plays, that's a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
We don't have to worry about that shoulder popping out again. So as long as I feel like the club's made the best decision possible for our future.
Yeah, it's good to see that they're not going to rush him back. And, the reports were that Matt wanted to come straight back on the ground once the shoulder was popped back in. So it would have been the easy way out for the club, and maybe in previous years they might have sent him back on the ground. So good to see us taking that cautious approach. It's obviously sad to know we're probably not going to see him for the rest of the year out there, but 18, 19 years old, future's bright, and he'll come back stronger than ever, I think.
Yeah. The only other piece of injury news is Luke Towie has suffered a fractured eye socket in the scratch match on the weekend. The boys played a practice match against the West Coast boys again. So we've got a bit of news from that scratch match. It sounds like Rankin and Joyce are both pushing their chances for AFL selection. Dawson's doing pretty well coming out of defence as a rebounding defender, and with the way Harborough and Hanley are at the moment, it sounds like there's a spot opening up. And Corey Ellis, he hasn't done much since he came up to the Suns, but it sounds like they're finally playing him in an offensive midfield role, and it seems like he's really thriving. They listed him as one of the best for the day. And then Fiorini is apparently doing quite well as well, doing everything the coaches are asking of him. And Hompsch and Graham, again, doing well as solid defenders.
Great to hear, especially Fiorini, who, it shocked a few people having him not only dropped, but, he totally missed out on emergencies. And I think the coaches have been pretty public with the reasoning behind that, saying, the areas he needs to work on. And it sounds like he's really taken a full grasp of that and really pushed to work on that. So he had that press conference the other day in Wollongong, spoke really well, and doesn't seem like he's, letting that get him down. He's a absolute professional and working so hard to get back in the team. So that's good to hear. And Rankin, which Suns fans not excited to see him debut 6 score involvements on the weekend in that scratch match? And all the news was positive.
And I know I was confident last week about Rankin playing. I said it was 90% chance to play this week against Geelong. Well, I am now 99% certain he will debut this week. He's had pretty good odds. He's put together 3 good games in the reserves. Hasn't suffered any injury setbacks, and from everything I understand, the club is leaning towards playing him. And now that we've got injuries and form issues, I think the club could easily find a spot for him to step into, and it will be very exciting to watch Rankin.
Absolutely. For all those punters out there that may or may not have lost a little bit of money on the Matt Rowell Rising Star bets, time to get that money in on Rankin, I think.
Absolutely. So we could have another Rising Star jumping in, and we'll just have to wait for this game against Melbourne. So, go on.
I was just going to say, who knows? Is there any rules that say a player can't win the Rising Star off 5 games?
No, there isn't. Do you think he's put together enough body of work to win off 5 games? He clearly is the best player from the first crop.
Well, it's hard to say. You take out that first game, which, he wasn't, by no means he wasn't a bad player, but he didn't stand out like he did in rounds 2, 3 and 4. So it's hard to say. He's probably going to come with 8 or 9 Brownlow votes for their middle batch of 3 games. I think most of the people on the panel who vote would believe he's probably the brightest light for the season, even if that short part. But I don't think morally they could vote for him off that small sample size.
Yeah, you've got a point. It's going to be interesting to see how they vote because he clearly is the best player. But as you said...
Until we see Isaac step on the field.
That's exactly right. But Rowell's still going to be eligible for it next year. He's only played the 5 games. If he doesn't play any more games this year, I think 10's the limit. So he's still going to be eligible for it next year. I think even if he wins this year, he'll still be eligible for it.
Depending how many games, once again, I don't want to keep bringing that up, but, Isaac could be eligible for it next year too, and he'll be hopefully fit and ready to play a full season. So it could be an interesting battle going forward between the two. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so in the news, we've got, if you don't know, the club is in Wollongong. They've based themselves in Wollongong for the next 2 weeks. We have a game against Melbourne at Giant Stadium in the west of Sydney. And then next week we've got a game against Sydney, and I presume that would be at the SCG. So the Suns are going on a bit of a road trip, and they're going to be stuck in New South Wales at least until 2 weeks away when the Queensland government lets them back in. So, do you think this is going to impact the Suns, this hub life issue that they're now dealing with?
There's no doubt in some way or another it is going to impact. I mean, you're taken out of your home for 2 weeks, it's going to have some sort of effect. But in saying that, all the presses, the reports coming out of camp, and even before they left, they were really all in on this. They were looking forward to it, the bonding that was going to come from it. We've seen from other clubs there's been a lot of hesitancy and players not wanting to go for reasons, right or wrong. They've all got those decisions they have to make. But Suns, a young team, not too many of them do have their families. There are a couple, but they just seem so invested in this. And if they're not just throwing it out as media spiel, it's really good to see that they're going to take a lot of positives out of it.
Yeah, we're no strangers to travelling. It was only 2 years ago when the Commonwealth Games was on, and we spent 10 weeks on the road. So I don't think these boys are strangers to travelling. I think they'll handle it quite well. And Stuart Dew said last night that I don't think there's any wives or girlfriends that's with them at the moment.
Yeah, he did say that, yes.
So I think it's just a bonding trip for the boys. They're going to knuckle down, focus on their footy, and try to enjoy themselves. I feel like they've got a bit of work on their plate now after that Geelong. There's certainly some stuff they can go over and work on and improve. And hopefully we'll see the result of that as early as this week against Melbourne.
Absolutely, and I'm really looking forward to this game. It is a game that, regardless of the ins and outs, I think we can win it. Melbourne haven't been great. They haven't been terrible, but by no means set the world on fire. So definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, so let's talk about this game against Melbourne. First of all, what changes do you think will happen? And bear in mind, besides the 22 or 23, I think, that we brought with us, because Zach Smith went down as well, we've got Graham, Sharp, Rankin, Fiorini, Smith, Corbett, and Wright. So that's 29 players.
Big squad to choose from. I wouldn't be swinging the axe too brutally. So, it's after a loss like that when, spirits have been high, it's easy for fans to sort of, get up and about and say we want to make 5-6 changes. But to me, I'd be keeping it as small as possible. For me, I think Hanley's got to come out and have a rest. I wouldn't swing too hard on Harbrow just yet. He's had one terrible game, but when you factor in his leadership, he's been pretty good down there for a few years. I'll back him in to bounce back. So for me, Hanley comes out. Rowell definitely comes out. And I think we do need to make that spot for Rankin. I think it's time, as you said earlier. Hard to say who you'd probably take out for Isaac, but I guess that's a decision the coaches are going to have to make.
So based on the outs that you've listed, with say we pull out Hanley and we pull out Rowell.
Yep.
Now, what sort of shuffling around do we do to get Rankin into the side? And who's the other player you'd bring in? Would it be a Fiorini? Would it be a Corbett or a Sharp?
Fiorini seems to be doing all the right things at the moment. He has started the year at AFL level playing down back, so you could make the argument that, you know, he goes in for Hanley, direct replacement. For me personally, I don't like him Fiorini down back. I think he's a pure midfielder. He approaches the game well as a midfielder, but I think the coaches will go with sort of Fiorini for Hanley. Rowell, I reckon you could be looking at Will Brodie, who seems to be doing the right things. And yeah, just the forward line hasn't been too dysfunctional. You could make a case for Darcy McPherson, who's by no means has he been terrible. He hasn't been bad, but he just hasn't had that output of last year. Granted, there's probably not as many midfield minutes available for him, but in that case, if he's playing down forward, he's probably got to be the next one to drop out to give Isaac that go.
Yeah. Like the notes I've got, I've written Rowell out for Brodie, but that's not going to happen because Brodie isn't part of that squad that's flown down there, as far as I'm aware. So,
of course.
So Fiorini seems like the most likely replacement for Rowell. Now, I've written down Powell because he was very quiet in this game, didn't really seem to have much impact. Sharp is obviously pushing his case for a debut. He's been doing quite well in the reserves games, and he plays that attacking wingman sort of role. Maybe it's time to give Sharp a debut. I've got Harbrow out instead of Hanley. I just thought Harbrow's efforts were disgraceful on the weekend. But then it's a matter of trying to find who you can shuffle on the field into that half back line to replace him. Maybe Ellis goes back from a wing, and then that sort of opens up a spot to move. I'm sure one of our forwards could go into a wing and you could bring Rankin in there.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see how they approach it, because you do bring up valid points, but what sort of mindset is Stuart Dew going in with? Is it still a win every game sort of mindset, or is it a mindset where we are going to push for that development and get, you know, games into kids? So are we putting in our best 22, or are we, you know, sort of pushing someone who's not quite at the level as someone who's played a few more games in, just to get games into them, if that makes sense?
Based on everything we've heard so far this year from the club, I would be under the impression that they're looking to win every game. And development and everything will come, but they're just looking to win as many games as possible. So yeah, I would honestly be very surprised if they went into these games with a purely development focused strategy. Yeah,
I think you know, when especially now, you look at teams, there's not too many teams I think we couldn't beat if we had our day. So we've already shown it against West Coast, who are obviously, you know, they've been poor, but they're still a hell of a team on paper. That we can lift for these games, lift for these teams. So you'd want to think that winning would be the first thing on their mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to finish up the talk for the Melbourne game, what's your key matchup from this game?
For me, key matchup, probably, and we touched on Maisie a little bit earlier, but Ben King on Stephen May. It is going to be a fantastic matchup, I think, just to really see how far King's come. Stephen's a quality defender, but there's a bit of a storyline behind it as well with what we traded. I think it was pick 6. We got back from Melbourne for Maisie, and we used that, I believe. Is that correct, to pick up Ben King?
Yeah, that's right. It was May and Kolodjasny for pick 6. I think we might have gave something back to them, and or they might have gave something back to us late for the Kolodjasny. But yeah, it resulted in Ben King coming to the Suns. So
bit of a storyline there, just to see, you know, early days who's winning that trade.
Well, yeah, Melbourne would definitely be being questioned about that trade. We heard on our good friends at AFL Exchange, they were questioning it as one of the most trades to, I can't remember what it was, but they were questioning the trade and the legitimacy of it. At the time, it was the right thing for Melbourne.
Yeah.
But certainly now, I think they'd be questioning and maybe looking at having that one back if they could.
I think there'd be a lot of Victorian teams that would like to have a certain Benjamin King on their lineup, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's even a team with a Max King in there, and they're still looking at getting a Ben King.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your gut feel going into the game? If you had to call it now, who's going to win the matchup between the two of them?
Ooh, I think Ben King would outdo Stephen May, and I know there's probably a bit of biasness in it, but I really like the way Ben King's approaching the game. He's attacking it head first. He's not shirking away from the contest, and it's results in quite a few goals for him. And I think Stephen May hasn't been overly impressive this year. We know how he gets worked up when teams aren't going the greatest, and I think that's probably going to be his downfall. If the Suns get on top early, I think Stephen May will unravel a bit. Might
be a bit of emotions there.
Yeah.
The only thing that really worries me is the physicality side of things. Stephen's a very physical player, so hopefully, if it comes down to that sort of thing, Ben can rise to the challenge. But I think he's got it in him, and as long as the quality of ball going forwards, the level it has been, I think we'll get on top, as will Ben. I'm going to put him down for 3 goals on the weekend.
Yeah, I'm thinking 3 goals as well. He's got a knack of kicking 3. It's the new 5 for 3 goals, isn't it?
It definitely is. And what's the new 100 then? We're going to start charging on the ground when a player kicks 60 for the season. Maybe 50 this year, shorten year.
Yeah, 50 is probably more the mark this year. All right, so let's do our predictions, our crystal ball. I reckon the Suns will beat Melbourne by, let's say, 5 goals. I think they'll come out with a vengeance and just run all over Melbourne, who looks a bit slow these days. And Ben King 3 goals, and I will say, I reckon Swallow's due for a good one. I'll give Swallow best on ground.
Yeah, I like to call the Swallow best on ground. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't also been that shining light. For me, I think we'll get the job done. I'm not quite as confident on the big 5-goal margin. I'll say 11 points, but in saying that, I think we'll be in control all day. You look at the Melbourne's midfield, they're getting a lot of it, Clayton Oliver in particular, but he just hasn't been as damaging as he has been in previous years, and I think... I reckon we've got ways of shutting that down, and our speed on the turnover and rebound, I think we'll get the job done on them. So Ben King for 3 goals. For me, I'm gonna spoil it and just say Greenwood, another best on ground performance. I think he's going to lift in them clearances where we're losing Matty Rowell, and really just keep working on them disposals to shut Mark Rashudo up.
Okay, and who do you think comes into your side? If you had to pick one player, who's the lock to come into the side this week?
To come back in, I think it's got to go, well, I won't say come back in, but to come in, Isaac Rankin, it's time. Yeah,
I agree with you on that. That's my lock, Isaac Rankin, to play this week. At least 99% certain, so don't shoot me if it doesn't happen. I'm 1% off.
We're all hoping.
All right, well, thanks for joining me tonight, Shannon. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Shane.
Hope to have you on the show in the near future, but until next time, go Suns.